Welcome back into Spotlight. Just 66 days away until the NFL draft, only 10 days away from the combine. So today, our very first full round mock right here on CBS Sports Spotlight. The host of With the First Pick podcast, Ryan Wilson, Mike Renner, they're going to take you through all 32 teams and pair their best selection from this year's prospects. And with that, let's get things started. Let's welcome in Ryan Wilson, Mike Renner here. Ryan, we should note that this is your mock draft. By the way, you can find both of yours, though, on CBSSports.com. We're going to dive into it. Ryan, Titans #1 overall pick. Some people have talked about the Titans trading out of this. You have them going with a quarterback. And I actually like what Mike said about this guy. He's the kind of guy you roll the dice on. Who are you going with?
Hey, Mike. Hey, Amanda. Thanks for dressing up with your Go Sports shirt on. I'm going to do you one better. I got my lucky Spencer Rattler shirt on. Let's go. I'm going to dedicate this mock draft Monday to my guy Spencer Rattler. And in that vein, I'm going to talk about someone who's probably going to go a little bit higher than Spencer Rattler and Cam Ward. And Mike's exactly right. We've talked about him to death, it feels like, and we'll continue to talk about him for the next 66 days. He's almost certainly going to be QB1. The question for the Tennessee Titans, do they want to take him here? Do they want to trade down and roll with Will Levis for another year? They have some decisions to make. But whoever ends up making this pick, I think the first overall pick is almost certainly going to be a quarterback, and I feel pretty confident that it's going to be Cam Ward, who's gotten better each and every year during his college journey from Incarnate Word to Washington State to the U last year. And I think he's certainly talked himself into the first round and almost certainly into QB1.
Let's go to the Browns coming in at #2. You guys are going to go back and forth on this because we do have to get through all 32 teams in an hour. Mike, the Browns here, look, they do need to address replacing Myles Garrett if he does, in fact, get traded. But Ryan has them taking Michigan D lineman Mason Graham. What do you think about that pick at #2 overall?
Yeah, I think it makes sense if they don't trade Myles Garrett, truthfully. I think that's where I would start going interior because they do have a need there, and they could use an interior pass rusher, and that just makes Myles Garrett's job easier. But if you trade Myles Garrett, to me, the pick's Abdul Carter. You got to get an edge replacement for him. He's that guy. To me, there are 3 blue-chip players in this draft class, Mason Graham, Abdul Carter, and Travis Hunter. I almost blanked there. Those 3 are the 3 blue-chip prospects. So if you get one of them, I think you're pretty happy for the Cleveland Browns at #2. Whether it's interior defensive line or on the edge, they'll be able to snag one of those 2 elite defensive line prospects, in my opinion.
If I was a draft expert, my mind would be blank all the time because there's way too many people to remember here. Let's keep rolling. We got the Giants coming in at #3. And Ryan, here you have them with the second quarterback going off the board, Colorado Shedeur Sanders. I'm curious, though, because it's kind of been a roller coaster in the top 6 picks or so for him. Is he falling? Is he rising? Where is he? And why the Giants?
Depends on who you ask. I like him a little bit better than Mike, but Mike and I agree that he's probably going to go in the first round. The question becomes how high and how much of a chance are some of these teams willing to roll the dice on these quarterbacks. Go back to the 2022 draft class where Kenny Pickett was the first quarterback taken. No one else. And we talked ourselves into Malik Willis and Des Ridder and Matt Corral. None of those other guys went into the first round. So we'll see. This draft class is better than that draft class. But if you're the Giants and you've been monkeying around for years now in terms of trying to get that quarterback situation sorted, Shedeur Sanders, there are worse options. And I think in the right system, and Mike and I have talked about this, he can win in the NFL, but you got to help him out. And that goes for any quarterback. Doesn't matter who you are. And we saw that with Jaden Daniels. We saw that with Bo Nix. If you help your young quarterback out, you have a chance to win based on what they put on tape in college. And I think Shedeur Sanders is that guy. Does he go 3? Maybe it's a little rich, but the Giants, again, would look pretty bad coming out of this draft class, or out of this draft, without a quarterback.
Let's go to the Pats at 4, and I was listening to your podcast. It is interesting. This is a team that may be closer to success than several of the teams picking in the top 10. Mike Ryan going with, let's see right here, because my prompter stopped working, LSU offensive tackle Will Campbell, #4 overall to the Patriots. Do you like that pick for the Pats?
And for the Pats, it's the biggest need, right? You need to surround Drake May with talent. To me, Campbell is the most NFL-ready offensive lineman in this draft class. It's just, do you take him in the top 5, right? I don't think he's a top 5 prospect. I don't see a lot of people who go to bat for him that highly. I don't go to bat for any of these offensive tackles, truthfully, that highly. So if you're the Pats and you do really want an offensive lineman, I think you'd be better served trading down from pick #4 and getting more players, more prospects to add to this team, because one Will Campbell, that ain't fixing your offensive line woes. You need multiple starters there up front.
We have the Jags coming in at #5. Look, this is a team with the new head coach, Liam Cohen. They're still searching for a GM. Ryan, Micah said in his latest mock draft that the player you have them taking may be the closest thing out there to Myles Garrett. Who is that going to the Jags at #5?
Yeah, man, if Trent Baalke was still there, he would have made this pick in his sleep and probably traded up and made it again because he checks every box physically. I think he's only 6'3", Abdul Carter. I don't care because the way he plays, it does conjure images of Myles Garrett and what he's able to do off the edge and wearing number 11 at Penn State and making that transition. You try to see Micah Parsons there, too. He's special, and I don't think he lasts till 5, and Mike's talked about the possibility of him going earlier. I'm 100% on board with that. But if the board shakes out this way, I would be hard-pressed to envision a situation where Abdul Carter gets past the Jaguars. I love the idea of pairing him with Josh Hines-Allen and then allowing the Jaguars, defensively at least, to get after it with that front four.
Seen him as high as number 2 in some of them. Guys, hang on. We're only 5 in, a long way to go here. Taking a look at picks 1 through 5, according to Ryan Wilson's latest mock draft. 2 quarterbacks already off the board and several teams addressing some big needs. Coming up, the Raiders are on the clock next with the 6th overall pick. And that big name, that guy right there, is still out there, Travis Hunter. Will teams pass on a quarterback that need one to take a shot at a two-way star player? Our first full-round mock on Spotlight continues. Welcome back into Spotlight, going through our very first full first-round mock draft here on Spotlight. We're starting with the Raiders, picking up, I should say, with the Raiders at number 6. Mike, the Raiders, they are wasting no time. Ryan has them taking Colorado two-way star player Travis Hunter. He's listed to the combine as a corner. So how do you think the Raiders should use him?
I think they should use him on both sides of the ball because they need both sides of the ball. They need a wide receiver and they need a cornerback. And with him, he's not going to do both full time. And it's easier to start at corner and moonlight at wide receiver. But moonlighting at wide receiver could look like playing every third down, playing in the red zone. And it wouldn't be that big of an ask. And to me, it's something that, given what he put on tape at Colorado, I think is very feasible at the next level. So he's my number 1 corner. He's number 1 wide receiver. The guy is special. And if he makes it here to 6, I know they need a quarterback. 2 are off the board here. If he makes it here to 6, it's a no-brainer in my opinion. I'm not reaching for the next quarterback on the board. I'm taking Travis Hunter.
Yeah, and the thing, Mike, you wonder is he going to be here at 6? Because he is, to your point, truly special. He's the number 1 player on my big board, Amanda. And, you know, he plays a position where there's a little depth and there's a lot of other needs at whether it's edge rusher or defensive tackle or quarterback. So those go a little bit earlier here. But if he went first overall, I could certainly see that. He's special, and we saw that year in and year out throughout his college career.
And we will note we don't have trades in this. That'll come later on as we get a little bit closer to the draft. So the Raiders do need a quarterback, but they land Travis Hunter. The Jets also now in need of a quarterback. They're picking 7th overall. But, Ryan, this is not where you have them finding one, at least in this mock draft. Why not, and who do you have the Jets taking at 7?
Yeah, because this quarterback class ain't that deep, Amanda. This would be a huge stretch to see a quarterback number 3 go off the board this high. That said, a year ago, 12 months ago, no one thought Bo Nix would be the 12th overall pick. So maybe something changes. I would be hard-pressed to see that happening. So in the meantime, you try to make Garrett Wilson happy. He's been begging for some help over the years. Devontae Adams wasn't that guy. So you go with Ted McMillan, who he was my wide receiver 1, a little bit ahead of Travis Hunter. He did a lot with a little last year in that Arizona offense. He is big. He is strong. He is fast. He has an enormous catch radius. He makes long passes look like short handoffs. He is that sort of player, and I think the quarterback situation is a huge concern in New York. But at least get the skill position players right and then bring a quarterback in that potentially has a chance. And I think Ted McMillan would certainly complement Garrett Wilson nicely, and I would imagine Garrett Wilson would be happy to see someone like Ted McMillan walk into the building to help him out.
Yeah, and the Jets, past 2 years, they had one of the highest drop rates of any team in the NFL. They have really bad hands. You're going to cut Devontae Adams this offseason, so it's really just Garrett Wilson there. People might think, do we really need a second wide receiver? In my opinion, heck yes, you do. If you don't get the quarterback in the draft, get whoever is quarterback, give him the best possible situation. And Ted McMillan's a guy who is day 1 NFL starter ready to come in and make an impact.
Jets coming in at number 7 there with a wide receiver. Let's go to the Panthers at 8. And I will say for the Panthers, we had somebody on air a couple weeks ago. This could potentially be a team, I don't know if I agree with this, that has a big turnaround this season. So it's all going to start right here with the draft at 8. Mike, Ryan has that turnaround starting with edge rusher Michael Williams from Georgia. How would you grade that with Williams going to the Panthers at number 8 overall?
I love taking a big swing at the defensive line. To me, Williams is one of the most physically impressive athletes in this draft class. He's not there from a pure technical standpoint, but he's not as far off as like Trayvon Walker was, in my opinion. And that's the popular comp for him, coming from the same school, similar builds, maybe not quite the high-end athleticism, but to me, he already knows how to use his hands in the running game. He is an NFL-ready run defender. For the Carolina Panthers, one of the worst run defenses in the NFL last season. You get Derek Brown back, you get Michael Williams in the fold there, all of a sudden you might have a shot of being a very good run defense just next year.
We get the Saints coming in at number 9. And this is interesting, Ryan. You have them taking cornerback Will Johnson. And this was, and correct me if I'm wrong, your number 1 player over the summer, ended up with an injury. So how far down do you think he drops because of that injury? But what makes him so special?
Yeah, I think Mike had him number 1, 2 on his board coming out of the summer as well, because he is truly freakish. And the comps you got when you talk to teams over the summer was Patrick Surtain, and you see a lot of that in him. He's not quite as big as Christian Gonzalez, but he's that sort of playmaker. He has ball skills, but you mentioned the toe injury that sidelined him for much of the second half of the season. I don't know if it's going to affect him at all, because remember, Amanda, Derek Stingley Jr. opted out his final year, and he still went ahead of Sauce Gardner. That ended up being the right pick for the Texans. Will Johnson is the best cornerback in this class, not named Travis Hunter, and he does everything well. If he fell to my Steelers in the 20s, I would be absolutely ecstatic, because you'd line him up next to Joey Porter Jr., but I think he's gone long before then. They lost Marshawn Lattimore in that trade the New Orleans Saints did, and Will Johnson can pencil in day one and be sort of a Patrick Surtain-like player. And again, if you get 75% of him early on in his career, this is a home run as a top 10 pick.
2 teams back-to-back here with the new head coach. The Saints with Kellen Moore now at the helm there. The Bears with Ben Johnson. And Mike, we see another offensive lineman go off the board here with Kelvin Banks Jr. As a Sooner, I have to say he is from that Orange School in Austin.
Yeah, Banks to me is exactly what the Bears need. He is a left tackle that can move the line of scrimmage. Ben Johnson, what he had in Detroit was a people-moving offensive line, and everything else was kind of built around that fact that you had to respect that running game no matter what. Bears offensive line, if you watched them last year, they're not built for that just yet. They need help. Kelvin Banks will help that. I love this guy's tape. I love the athlete. He's not polished, but he is a guy that has all the tools that you need to be an all-pro caliber left tackle in the NFL. So if you're the Bears, he's on the board for you. Maybe he's not a home run right off the bat. Maybe it doesn't fix your pass pro right off the bat. But in time, this guy could be special.
I just want to point out the OU-Texas rivalry is so good that there was a player at a Thunder game who made a half-court shot for $10,000. First thing he did, horns down. That's how it is done in college football. Let's get back to the draft here. We have the 49ers at number 11, right? This was a weird year for this team. This is a team we normally talk about every single season as a Super Bowl contender. So how do they start to right that ship in the draft?
And they got to sign the quarterback. But in terms of the draft, Mike and I did a mock draft with the first pick last week, and Mike had the 49ers trading up for an offensive tackle, which certainly makes some sense because Trent Williams is certainly getting older. Had there been Kelvin Banks Jr. there, they would have taken him. Had Will Johnson been there, the cornerback, that maybe they take him. Instead, I went with Jahad Campbell. And this is a projection pick because Jahad's only 20 years old. He is freakishly athletic in a draft class on the defensive side full of freakish athletes. And maybe you like Jalen Walker a little better here. That's fine. I'm not going to quibble too much with that. But Fred Warner needs a running mate, and I think that someone like Jahad Campbell and his athleticism and his playmaking ability and his instincts, whether it's off ball or even you can move him outside if you want, he's going to bring it. And Robert Saleh can perhaps feel like he's the 49ers of old with the way that defense could be fashioned if Campbell ends up landing there.
49ers of old, that is a team to remember. The Cowboys of old is getting further and further in the rearview mirror, although Dak Prescott says this team is similar to the Eagles that can win the Super Bowl. Cowboys with the 12th overall pick. Mike, Ryan has not moved off this pick for a minute now, has them taking Ashton Jeanty, running back out of Boise State. Look, they need help in the run game. We saw what Saquon did for the Birds. Do you take a running back this high? Is Ashton Jeanty worth it?
I think he's that good. I mean, if you just go back through the running backs that have been taken at this spot or higher in recent years, and I put his film right up there with any of them. I mean, the guy's contact balance, his ability to break tackles, and his home run hitting ability. I mean, he has legit possible 4.3 speed. We'll see it next week's combine, but I didn't see many people catching him in the open field. So when you pair all that together, yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense for the Dallas Cowboys. They're a team that would draft a running back this highly. They did it with Ezekiel Elliott. So to me, Jeanty, he's right in that mold. He goes to a team that desperately needs a running back. Obviously, Rico Dowdle hit him for agency. And they also desperately need to move some jerseys. And Ashton Jeanty, he'd do just that.
Yeah, and the other thing, Mike, I don't think they're one player away, so you might as well try to get the guy that's going to give you the most bang for the buck. And maybe that's an edge rusher, but almost certainly not. You rarely see an edge rusher make that sort of impact day one. And I think when you're talking about a running back who can come in quickly, get assimilated to the offense, and understand the offense quickly, that makes the most sense in this scenario. But look, man, they could go linebacker, they could go cornerback, they could go defensive line if they wanted to, even offensive tackle. But I think Ashton Jeanty is the guy that gives you the most opportunity to see the most production the fastest. And, if Dak Prescott's going to keep staying there like the Philadelphia Eagles, you're going to need your Saquon Barkley. And I think Ashton Jeanty is the closest to that in this draft class.
I didn't even think about the money aspect in this, Mike. And I flew out of DFW this morning. And at 5 a.m., I was rubbing my eyes because I was like, that's a kid wearing an Ashton Jeanty jersey in the middle of DFW Airport. Sure enough, he could potentially move those jerseys there if he does land in Dallas. Guys, we are getting through. We're a little less than halfway done right now. Taking a look at picks 6 through 12 there. The Raiders moving past their need for a quarterback, taking Travis Hunter at 6. The Jets getting an offensive weapon with a 6'5 receiver, and the Cowboys trying to boost their running game with Heisman finalist Ashton Jeanty. Arguably the top tight end in this year's draft is still available, Tyler Warren from Penn State. Before the season began, this was a guy who was a day 3 pick. So why he is so talented and who lands him, that's coming up. Welcome back into Spotlight on this Monday. It is Mock Draft Monday, going through the first round, all 32 teams. We're going to pick things back up, and this is a big chunk, guys, so take a deep breath. We're going 13 through 22 right now. Dolphins at 13. Tight end, thank you, Ryan. Tyler Warren from Penn State. Ryan, I was reading through your article online, and you said at the beginning of the season he was a late day 2, early day 3 guy. How did he jump all the way to 13 here?
Because he was the only show in town for the Nittany Lions. He did just about everything. Obviously, he can catch the ball, he can run it, he can throw it, he can snap it, and he was a difference maker play in and play out. Now, is he the athlete of Colston Loveland, the Michigan tight end? No, he is not. But I think in the right system, and Miami feels like a system where you're going to get the ball a lot because Tua's going to get rid of the ball. Tyler Warren can feast in that sort of system. If you're looking for a guy to be a long strider in the middle of the field and run every route, wide receiver routes included, maybe Colston Loveland is the right tight end for you. But Tyler Warren has, I don't know if anyone's done more for himself in this draft class, perhaps outside of Cam Ward, than what Tyler Warren was able to do over the course of the 2024 season for Penn State.
Hey, congratulations to him. Make that money. Let's go to the Colts at 14. Hot mess, I think we can say it for the Colts in some form or fashion sometimes. Look, Shane Steichen, we didn't know if he was going to have a job. He still has it. So they have the 14th overall pick. Ryan has them taking safety Malachi Starks from Georgia. Ryan pointed out, Mike, tell me if you agree with this, that he's not only one of the most talented players on the field, he's actually one of the smartest on the field as well.
Yeah, Malachi Starks feels like just hitting a double in baseball. The guy is good at pretty much everything it takes to be good at the safety position. He's not a playmaker, though. Only 1 pick, only 2 pass breakups this past year. He's not a ball hawking safety. That's not where you're getting. Where you're getting is a guy who doesn't make too many mistakes. He makes tackles in the open field. He's assignment sure on the back end, and he has good range to finish plays that are made there in front of him. And if you're the Indianapolis Colts and you have this defense that has just kind of been a sieve the past 2 years, you need a guy like that is reliable through and day in and day out. Putting him next to Nick Cross, that would be one of the best safety tandems in the NFL, in my opinion.
A lot of Georgia players going in this draft, as is the next pick going to the Falcons at number 15. Look, they were pretty close with the Bucs. They fell just short when it came to that division there. Ryan, you're going with Jalen Walker. He's listed as an edge. That's where we have him. But you point out teams could probably use him in a variety of ways. How do the Falcons use him?
Yeah, they need help a lot of places, so I think that'll be the fun thing for Coach Raheem Morris. And look, they drafted Braylon Trice a year ago to Washington on day 2. He got hurt, so he didn't play at all, and they desperately need help at the edge rush position. But Jalen Walker, he could end up going higher than this and go before Jahad Campbell. That wouldn't surprise me in the least. But again, another freakish athlete, surprisingly, that plays at Georgia and is just everywhere. He's an absolute thumper, but he's an old-school thumper as the off-ball linebacker who moves like a freakish sideline to sideline quick twitch athlete that we see sort of in today's modern NFL in that tweener position. So wherever they use him in Atlanta, I think he has an opportunity to be successful because they need it, but also because he's typically the best athlete on the field, and he'll be one of the best athletes on that defense from day one for the Falcons.
FYI for people watching, we're going through Ryan's mock draft. You can find both of yours, though, CBSSports.com. And we find the Cardinals at 16. And actually, both of you have them taking the same player here. So, Mike, why does defensive lineman Shamar Stewart fit so well with the Cards?
Because he's a big boomer bust player. I mean, this guy's ceiling is special. You'll see it at the Combine next week. The numbers he's going to put up are absurd for a guy who's 280 pounds. And it also makes sense with what they want to do defensively. If you put him across from Darius Robinson, their first rounder from a year ago, who was in a similar mold, the 6'5", long, 280-plus pound defensive end, you have two guys that just can collapse the running game. They can collapse pockets in the passing game. It just makes life a lot easier for your linebackers, for your defensive tackles, when you have two bullies off the edge that the Arizona Cardinals can put together here.
You agree with that pick? You agree on this next one as well? Do you look at each other's mock drafts? Like, do you compare? Obviously, you talk about them on the podcast, but
Going blind. You're going blind.
Going blind. Okay, we're doing that for this one here. So let's go to the Bengals coming in at 17. And again, both of you guys agree on this player, tight end Colston Loveland out of Michigan. Mike called him a difference maker that the Bengals haven't seen yet. Ryan, do you agree with that, and what makes him so special?
It's incredibly disrespectful to Mike Gesicki and the world's worst gritty that he likes to hit every time he catches the ball for 8 yards trying to get a first down. Now, he's right. And what's funny, Amanda, is as we get closer to the Combine, I go back and watch a lot of these players. And I watched Colston a couple days ago. I forgot what a good athlete he is. And he's one of the best route runners, tight end or wide receiver in this draft class. The issue with him was that the quarterback play was, shall we call it, suspect at Michigan. He will not have that issue in Cincinnati. And in fact, he could go for 1,200 yards. He could put up Brock Bowers type numbers if Joe Burrow is getting him the ball consistently, depending on what happens with T. Higgins. We'll see with that. But he's number 10 on my big board, I think, top 50 big board right now. And so that means he could probably go higher than here, depending on need. But if he lands here in Cincinnati, that is an absolute grand slam, whether T. Higgins is on the roster next year or not.
Yeah, I think they're drafting him if he's on the board there when they're picking. I know for a fact 2 years ago when Dalton Kincaid, Michael Mayer were coming out, Dalton Kincaid came off the board 2 picks before them. They really wanted him, but when Michael Mayer was there, they didn't draft him. So if they're looking between Warren and Colston Loveland, I think they prefer the Loveland type at tight end. That's obviously why they signed Mike Gesicki. They want that guy who can be like an extra wide receiver over the middle of the football field. Colston Loveland, at only 20 years old, to be doing what he did, this guy could be a special player if dropped with Joe Burrow.
I was about to say, let's just get some Joe Burrow some help, because some of those games were absolutely wasted. His talent there. We're going across the country. Seahawks coming in at 18th with the 18th overall pick. Ryan has them taking out offensive tackle who is only 6'3". Mike, is that going to be a problem?
I think it's going to be a guard is what it's going to be. It might be a problem at offensive tackle. Wouldn't surprise me if someone gives them a shot there, but for the Seattle Seahawks specifically, they got their tackles. They have Abraham Lucas on the right side. They have Charles Cross on the left side. They have desperate needs on the interior. And to me, he's a plug-and-play interior guy, probably at right guard for them. And it's what they needed. They were so bad. They gave up so much pressure last year through that guard, center, guard trio that I would use a first-round pick, even if you're considering Armand Mambu a guard in this draft class.
Yeah, no, Mike's right. In Seattle, he makes a ton of sense inside. I don't care that he's 6'3", Amanda, in terms of whether he plays tackle or not. He has 34-inch arms, which is plenty long. And if you watch him play, very rarely does he give up pressures, and that's sort of the whole point, right? Abe Lucas has struggled to stay healthy, but if he's healthy, you just kick Mbu inside, and then once the contracts are up, you decide whether you want to move Mbu outside or not. But I think he's a great problem to have. You can never have enough offensive linemen, and that's one thing that the Seahawks, and Geno Smith can attest to this, were lacking last year because he spent a lot of time running for his life. Mbu sort of flew under the radar in the fall, and then people started watching him as we led up to the All-Star games and now the Combine, and they're like, oh, this kid in Missouri can play, and whether it's right tackle or somewhere else, I think he has a chance to be a first-round pick.
I had to look up his weight because I'm seeing that picture there, 6'3", and I'm like, that's a big dude. Listed anywhere from 315 to 325. So you're going to get a lot of weight on that O-line no matter what. Let's go to the Bucs here with the 19th overall pick, winners of the NFC South. I love this Bucs team. I love Baker Mayfield. It hurts just because they're so close. So Ryan, let's try to get them over the hump. They made it to the wild card round, and then they were bumped out from the Texans. Who do you have the Bucs taking at 19?
Luther Burden, the wide receiver, would make sense here, but I went edge rusher Nick Scorton, transferred from Purdue to Texas A&M, and Mike and I have talked about this. He had flashes last year. It wasn't as consistent as you want, but he's a guy you build in the lab when you want your edge rusher to look like that. And so getting off the bus, he's the guy that sends the message to the opposing team. And I think if he can put it together, this is going to be a steal. He might end up going a little bit later than this, but physically all the tools are there. He has one of the best spin moves of any edge rusher in this draft class. He's not afraid to wear it out. I like to see him add a little bit more to his bag. But I think he fits the measurement, height, weight, speed profile that the Buccaneers look for in their edge rushers. And wide receiver, while it makes some sense here, I can see Scourton being the type of player to look at, especially if he can put it all together, play in and play out.
We're going to go to the Broncos at 20 here. It was so much fun watching this Broncos team. I got to cover a game of theirs. It's young. It's talented. Bo Nix does need some help when it comes to offense. We've talked about maybe the Broncos going with a tight end. Ryan has them right now taking defensive lineman Walter Nolan. Mike, do you agree with that? Do you think the Broncos should go in a different direction?
Yeah, I think Luther Burden would be a great pick here as well, especially with his ability after the catch. But I don't hate going defensive line, especially given who's in your division. You just saw the secret to beating Patrick Mahomes. It's basically just don't let him feel peace in the pocket ever. And while they had a great pass rush last year, you can still get better. You can always get better in that regard. And Walter Nolan has real juice on the interior. You add him to that mix with Zach Allen, with John Franklin Myers, with Jonathan Cooper, with Nick Bonito. It's like you can sub guys out and still have an elite pass rush. That's what it takes to really impact these high-end quarterbacks. And they got, unfortunately, a couple of them in their division right now. So, yeah, Walter Nolan still makes a ton of sense.
Both of you guys have mentioned Luther Burden quite a bit, wide receiver out of Missouri here. Still on the board at 21, although not anymore. Ryan, is this selfish for you with the Steelers taking him at 21? Because we don't know who the quarterback's going to be right now, but they get a really good weapon on offense for your Steelers.
Yeah, as a Steelers fan, this is the only reason Luther Burden's still available. Tampa Bay needed him, Denver needed him. But like, nah, we'll take a defensive player just so that the no quarterbacks Pittsburgh Steelers can take Luther Burden. Look, whoever the quarterback is, George Pickens needs help, and who knows if George Pickens is even going to be there. Luther Burden was a victim of an injured quarterback in Brady Cook for much of the 2024 season, but his 2023 tape, to quote the great Brian McFadden, is hot tape. And he is a special, athletic, in the slot or outside game changer. And our guy Mike is a big gamble on the 40 times at the combine. He thinks Burden's going to be moving, and that's the type of game stretcher they need opposite George Pickens, whoever the quarterback ends up being in Pittsburgh.
All right, so is he still going to be here at 21? I mean, both of you have mentioned a handful of teams now that can use him. How high do we think Luther Burden's actually going to go, and not in Ryan's, fantasy world?
I think he goes high as 13.
Top 15,
like Miami.
Yeah,
I think that's possible. He did not produce, though, this past year, and he's going to have to answer questions about why exactly that was the case. But, when he had just over 600 yards after having over 1,200 as a sophomore, it's like, what happened there? But talent-wise, he's more talented than 20th overall pick.
All right, he's more talented than that pick right there. Let's go to the Chargers at 22. It'll be the second year for Jim Harbaugh back in the NFL. Ryan, you're going with an edge rusher, and I want to get this right. Who do you describe as juiced up, twitchy, nonstop motor, freakishly athletic? So, Mike, let me ask you this. Did he describe James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee correctly?
That he did. I mean, this guy, we've already talked about a few guys that are probably going to have good weeks next week. He's amongst them. He may be at the top of that heap. I mean, he is 240-ish pounds, probably going to run the 4.4s. I mean, his top speed, you see it when he plays out in space, is special. But the thing is, he's built like a wide receiver. He still needs to put some mass on his frame, so he's a little bit of a project. Maybe not a guy who you want starting day one for you, but on third downs, and they're going to need that help with Khalil Mack hitting free agency. The Chargers, kind of what I just said about the Denver Broncos, they need to start loading up on pass rushers as well.
Well, you can never have enough pass rushers. Like, that's the end of it. Ryan, Mike, hang on just a second. We have 10 more picks to go here. Recapping 13 through 22. Bengals get Joe Burrow some help with 6'5" tight end, who Ryan says runs like he's 185, but blocks like he's 260. Colts looking for some consistency with the safety Malachi Starks, and the Broncos get a star defensive lineman with Walter Nolan falling in their laps at number 20. Coming up, only 10 more picks to go. The Chiefs have a lot of work to do this offseason. And who do the Eagles take with the final pick in the first round? We'll finish things up on the other side of this break. Spotlight on this Monday. We have 10 more picks to go in the first round here. We're going to pick things up. Oh, by the way, hi, Ryan. Hi, Mike. I'm Amanda. With the Packers at number 23, they get a DB, according to Ryan Wilson, a player, Ryan, who reminds you of Brian Branch. Why is that, and who do you like?
Because he plays everywhere. He's not the prototypical Brian Branch in terms of the height, weight, speed. He'll probably run a little faster than Brian did. I think Branch ran a 4.58. Shouldn't have mattered. He still should have been a first-round pick. But Jade plays cornerback. He plays slot. He can line up anywhere, and he was always around the ball, and he has ball skills. And as much as I like giving him to Mike's Packers, I wouldn't hate it if he went to the Pittsburgh Steelers a few picks ahead of that, because they need help in the secondary as well. And he feels like, oddly, playing on that great Texas team on that really good defense. One of the guys we sort of overlooked in the fall, but he's a fantastic game-changing player in the secondary, and his skills translate immediately to the next level.
He feels almost like the Bullard, who they drafted in the second round at safety last year out of Georgia, and that there's no like trait to him that you point to. It's like, oh man, he's elite at XYZ. He just plays with the physicality that if you're really trying to build this secondary in Green Bay that can, compete with some of the likes of the top of the NFC, you need physical corners. And to me, he's a very, very physical.
Our producer's mad at you, so he's bleeping your mic out, Mike. Apparently, we're going to try to get that fixed. So, Ryan, I'm going to start with you. With the Vikings at 24, they get another DB. And we want people to know, as you get to know these players going into the draft, his name is spelled Shavon, Revel Jr. But, Ryan, that's not how we pronounce it. So give us his pronunciation and how he helps his Vikings team.
I was going to make you pronounce it, Amanda, but we talked to him at the Shrine Bowl. He's from Lewisburg, North Carolina, not far down the road from where I grew up. Shavon is pronounced Suvone, so he seemed surprised that I knew it. So if you see him walking down the street, say, hey, Suvone, what's up? And he'll probably be equally as surprised. But he is long. He is like Sauce Gardner-ish long in terms of the way he plays. Tore his ACL early in the fall, so he didn't get a lot of tape in 2024. But his 2023 tape was very good. Played at ECU. Another guy with great ball skills. He moves. He's a fluid mover in that even though he's incredibly tall, he moves like he's 5'10", 5'11". And the question will be the medicals, right? Does it check out? Typically ACLs, teams know what to expect from ACLs in terms of the recovery. And if it's not a redo or there's some complications after the initial surgery, it's all systems go. So it feels like he'll find his way into the first round unless there's some medicals we don't know about. And he is every bit a first-round talent based on the tape he put on the field early in 24 and going back early in his career at ECU in 2023.
And he's already got that purple and gold and yellow. He's ready to go there with the Vikings. Let's go to the Texans at 25. You have them taking a defensive lineman in Kenneth Grant. And we were talking about the Texans defense over the break, and our producer Stryker, he goes, oh, they were really good. And you go, eh. So why the and how does Kenneth Grant help them?
No, Stryker's right. They are really good, but it felt like at times there was some disconnect on both sides of the ball. But they got it together, and when they're healthy, they are a game-changing unit. And I think the fun thing about Kenneth Grant, and I'll give credit to our buddy Pete Prisco, he said, Kenneth Grant is an insanely good defensive lineman at Michigan, but Mason Graham is so good you forget Kenneth Grant's there, which is a weird thing to say because Kenneth Grant weighs in the neighborhood of 330 pounds. But he is a guy who can move heaven and earth literally, and he is twitchy that he moves in a little sense like Mason Graham. He's not quite that twitched up, but to be that big and move with the speed with which he moves is a real issue for an interior offensive lineman. And he was a headache week in and week out in the Big Ten, and it certainly helped that he was lined up next to Mason Graham. At Houston, he would be lined up next to someone named Will Anderson Jr. So it only gets better at the next level, and they need some help on the interior of that defensive line. And I think Kenneth Grant, should he be there, would be an obvious choice for the Texans. We're
going to have Mike Renner here back in just a second. I think everything's working with him. There he is. Ryan, we'll start with you, though. We're at the Rams at number 26. Welcome back, Mike. You're going with Gray Zabel, and you noted, Ryan, on your mock draft that nobody helped themselves more at the Senior Bowl than he did. How did he make such a difference at that?
Well, he played tackle at North Dakota State this season. He has some guard in his career at North Dakota State prior to 2024, but he showed up at Mobile, Alabama, and only played guard and center. And Amanda, he looked like he'd been playing there the previous 20 years of his life. It was incredibly smooth, the transition, the one-on-one drills, which are geared towards the defensive lineman having success. He locked in, and he was dominant at times. He was dominant in the team drills, and I think that's going to translate. And when you talk to folks around the league, down there in Mobile, they kept coming back to this. This guy's a team leader. He's going to be team captain on day one. And all those things taken together, and given the position he plays, I think he has a chance to be a first-round pick and probably a day one starter.
Yeah, the Rams with that, 8-year stretch was it, where they didn't have a first-round pick, that came at the expense of their offensive line. They had to sign so many free agents to build this thing up. And then when you have so many older offensive linemen, chances are they get hurt, and that's what we saw last year. So they need the depth. They need to use these premium picks now on the trenches that's difficult to find in the later rounds. And a guy like Gray Zabel with his versatility to play probably 4 to 5 positions along the offensive line, that's the perfect guy to draft when you don't necessarily need an offensive line, because one guy goes down, he can fill in for any of them.
We're getting to that portion in the draft where we have these teams that were oh so close to making it to the Super Bowl and fell just short. Ravens at 27 here. Ryan, you're going with an edge rusher and Mike Green. He's out of Marshall, who's now worked himself into the first round. Why is that?
He's going to work his way up from 26 as well, because I did this mock draft, little secret, right after the Senior Bowl, and the more I watch Mike Green, the more I love him. UVA transfer from Williamsburg, Virginia, went to the same high school, Amanda, as some guy named Lawrence Taylor, and this is all he did for the first 2 days at the Senior Bowl, just dominate one-on-ones. And he said, you know what, I'm going to take Thursday's practice off, and that was well-deserved. In terms of him being available here in the Ravens, should this happen, he fits the athletic profile, the Odafe Oweis and the David Ajabos, but I think he has a chance to be a top 15 team pick, maybe higher. He is so incredibly juiced up, and he plays, it's a cliche, he plays every play like it's his last. This guy does it. He may burn more calories in a football game than anyone else on that field, because every single play he is going 1,000 miles an hour like his hair's on fire, and more times than not he ends up in the backfield either disrupting a run play or getting after the quarterback.
We're going to the Lions at 28, and I am so happy that I get to listen to you guys during the commercial break, because I asked Ryan last week, and this is a thing every year with Ryan. He falls in love with a player, and he just loves them, and he can't stay away from them, and he moves them way up in the draft. And Ryan, I heard you say, I am falling in love with Jack Sawyer, edge rusher. That is who the Lions are taking right now, according to Ryan, at 28. Mike, what do you think about Jack Sawyer with the Lions?
It does fit with the Lions in the way they've drafted, right? They haven't really coveted traits necessarily in the Brad Holmes era. They just draft guys who are good at football. And for that perspective, Jack Sawyer is very good at football. You didn't need to watch too many of his snaps to know that this guy knows how to play defensive end. It's just how physically imposing is he? And we're going to find out, we'll put some numbers to it next week at the Combine. But that's the worry, is that the explosiveness, the juice, the twitch is just not quite first round what usually goes that highly, just because it's such a traits-based position, rushing the passer. But if you draft Jack Sawyer, you know you just drafted a good football player. So from the Detroit Lions perspective, they've done it before, could very well do it again in the first round.
Yeah, man, and Mike sort of touched on it. He feels like a Detroit Lion, right? I remember over the summer we talked to Chris Spielman, who's in the front office in Detroit, and I said, how'd you guys end up with Brian Branch and Amon-Ra St. Brown? Because they both ran slowish 40s, and he said, well, we watched them play football, and their time speed during the games, they wear all these GPS trackers. Those guys are moving, and that's what it feels like with Jack Sawyer. And look, this isn't the comp, but this is what I felt like when I watched him, Amanda. T.J. Watt went to the bottom of the first round back in 2017 to the Steelers, in part because he was quote-unquote stiff. That's the motor that we see Jack Sawyer play with. Whether that ends up being his career, that's another matter entirely. But it won't be from lack of effort, and I love the lack of effort. And he's probably a little stronger than we give him credit for, because he can take over in the run game and then manhandle offensive tackles in the pass game. Again, he's not, as Mike notes, juiced up and super twitchy, but he is always around the ball and always making plays, usually in the biggest moments, it feels like.
Some back-to-back guys out of Ohio State here. We go to the Commanders at 29. Offensive tackle Josh Simmons out of Ohio State. Get some protection there for Jaden Daniels. And Ryan, you were talking about him in your article, and you said maybe he could have gone back to school, but here he is, and we find him in the first round.
Yeah, I would have loved him to come back to school. He was a San Diego State transfer. Didn't play a lot at Ohio State. Got hurt in that Oregon game. Looked good up to that point, but they hadn't really played anyone. And maybe he doesn't need to be rushed into the field in Washington. Brandon Coleman, who they drafted last year, was okay at left tackle. They would probably like to upgrade that. They could kick Brandon Coleman inside. But Josh Simmons, if you're patient, athletically, he has a chance to be a really good football player. He's just not quite there yet, in part because he got hurt, but also he hadn't played a ton of football. So this is more of a value down the road pick for Washington, which is a weird thing to say for a team that we didn't know who they were going to be 12 months ago, and they got every single thing right, it feels like, between now and then. And if they get this right, one more thing, or one less thing, I should say, for Jaden Daniels to have to worry about along the offensive line.
It's going to be a lot of fun to watch him there in his sophomore season. The Bills, I feel like this is the fan base that was heartbroken the most this season with number 30, and they're taking a wide receiver. Well, I should say Ryan has them taking a wide receiver and Matthew Golden. Mike, you were going with a DB, so what do you think about Ryan's selection here with the pass catcher?
It's definitely one of their biggest needs. I think they don't have a true outside separator. They drafted Keon Coleman last year, but he's much more of a contested catch guy. You saw that throughout his rookie season. Golden, his superpower is getting open. He is a guy that runs routes at a high level, can run the full route tree, and because of that, someone that I think the Buffalo Bills definitely would covet at the back end of the first.
It's the Chiefs' time at 31. All of you very sad Chiefs fans. It was very tough to watch. But we pointed out all season, look, the things that came up in the Super Bowl were issues all season long, and we thought they could overcome it. Ryan, there's a lot of needs for this Chiefs teams or area they need to address. So where do they start in the draft at 31?
They're in a spot here, Amanda, because they need a tackle, and they keep drafting tackles that don't quite work out, and maybe they try to sign one in free agency. We'll see how that works out, see what happens with Trey Smith. But Tyler Booker out of Alabama quietly had a fantastic season for the Crimson Tide, and I think he's a guy you could plug and play in day one. Unfortunately, he doesn't play tackle, which would solve a bigger issue for them. But they're going to need help along the offensive line. The question is where exactly. So I went with Tyler Booker, the best player still available, even though he doesn't play tackle. And sort of similar to what we saw after the Tampa Bay Super Bowl loss the Chiefs suffered 4 years ago, they feel like they're back to square one. So anything to make the offensive line better is a step in the right direction. And I think Tyler Booker goes a long way to help do that.
Finally, we get the Eagles sitting at number 32. Ryan has them taking a wide receiver, Emeka Egbuka. You're the Eagles, and you just won the Super Bowl. Mike, who would you like to see them take? But also, what do you think about Ryan's pick?
Yeah, I think they're going to go business as usual, truthfully, and go in the trenches just because that's what they do. They have numerous free agents going along the defensive side of the football and offensively. So I think that's where their eyes will be, just because you got Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown under contract for the next 3 years, and they're not going to change their stripes even though they lost Kellen Moore. They're all of a sudden going to be slinging it around the yard and using 3 wide receiver sets. So I think he'll just be lost there if he goes there. But he's definitely a first-round talent, Emeka Egbuka. This guy, to me, is very, very similar to Chris Olave coming out from like a skill set perspective, like how they run routes, how proficient they are at them, how savvy they are. He's just bigger. I mean, he is every bit of 6'2", 205 pounds. And because of that, can play through contact better than Olave could. And Olave went top 15. Maybe that was a little rich in retrospect. But I think Emeka Egbuka probably goes higher than this when it's all said and done.
Ryan, how much of a luxury pick is this in general for the Eagles at 32? Because it seems they're pretty solid across the board.
Oh, yeah, no, this is a huge luxury pick, even though they only have really 2-ish receivers. But to Mike's point, you don't want to have 15 guys in the same position under contract making big-time money. So I get that as well. I could, give them an off-ball linebacker to make Eagles fans upset, but I didn't do that. And maybe they go along the defensive line or maybe offensive line. There are several ways they could go. But to your point, Amanda, they're pretty stocked up everywhere. They have very few issues, especially if they can re-up Zach Bond or maybe Milton Williams and get some of those guys back into the fold.
Ryan, Mike, we appreciate it. Hang on. We're going to do recaps going over what we just saw right after this, but taking a look at picks 23 through 32 there. Just a lot of needs for some of these teams. They're trying to get over the hump. And by the way, you can find this entire mock draft on CBSSports.com. Welcome back into Spotlight here. Just a couple minutes left in our show. We just went through Ryan Wilson's full first-round mock draft. You can find it on CBSSports.com. Going through some takeaways. I'm curious, though, about the number 1 overall pick or just potential trades that we could see. Ryan, I want to start with you. Mike, we'll go to you next. Titans have the number 1 overall pick here is to take a look at the odds to make the selection for the number 1 overall pick. Ryan, what are the chances the Titans still have it come draft time?
Minus 164, according to the graphic. I don't know. That's the real question, right? So here's the thing, and here's the question I would put to Mike, because fit matters. Jaden Daniels in Washington, Bo Nix in Denver. Which quarterback, let's say Cam Ward's our guy, which team best fits Cam Ward right away? I'm actually, if the Cleveland Browns weren't located in Cleveland and it was Kevin Stefanski, I'd feel pretty good about that. But I think I'm leaning towards the Raiders, Mike.
Ooh. I mean, I do think they have the most desperation and are in the best spot to go attack it. The one that's really interesting to me, and if I'm betting looking at that graphic, is the Browns at plus 1,500, because they will be making a trade that's going to involve picks here very shortly with Myles Garrett. And if that could involve the number one overall pick and you're the Tennessee Titans, you could get an immediate pass rusher in Myles Garrett at the top of the draft for that number one overall pick or some semblance of it. I think that'd be something they could be interested in. Now, I think it would also be a pick swap. It'd be number one for number two, and then you'd have some trades and some moves going with later on picks going probably in that scenario going to the Cleveland Browns. But it's something that I think if you're the Tennessee Titans and you don't really love the top of this quarterback class, I'd explore, because I talked about off the top, Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, Travis Hunter. You don't want to move down to 6. You won't get one of those 3 if you do. So I think that's the most intriguing one to me for a pick swap at 1 and 2.
We've talked a lot here on Spotlight, also on HQ. Somewhat of a weaker class when it comes to quarterbacks, not only in the draft but in free agency. For more on what could happen in the draft, make sure to download With the First Pick podcast with Ryan Wilson and Mike Renner.